Troy had walls so strong they were said to be built by the god Poseidon himself. Modern corporations spend billions of dollars a year on firewalls, encryption, and cybersecurity infrastructure. And in both cases, the strongest defenses in the world were bypassed by something almost embarrassingly simple: convincing one person on the inside to just let it in. Unbreakable walls keep getting broken by breakable people. Why? Think about the last time you almost clicked a link you shouldn't have. Maybe it was an email that looked like it came from your bank. Maybe a text about a package delivery you weren't expecting. For a second, you believed it. Then something made you stop. That half-second of doubt is older than email, older than the internet. It's older than writing itself. Every system built to keep people safe eventually runs into the same wall. You can build the strongest defenses in the world, but at some point, someone has to be trusted to make a decision. A guard has to decide whether to open a gate. An employee has to decide whether to click a link. And that decision point is the one thing no wall, no lock, and no firewall can fully protect. This mattered enormously in the ancient world. A besieged city that made the wrong call at its gates could lose everything: its people, its wealth, its future. It matters just as much today. According to Verizon's Data Breach Investigations report, the human element is a factor in the large majority of confirmed data breaches. Not broken code. People. The problem was never just how to build stronger walls. It was how to protect the judgment of the person standing at the gate. By the 10th year of the Trojan War, the Greeks had a problem. Troy's walls held. Story, at least, says they were the work of the gods themselves. Direct assault hadn't worked. Siege hadn't worked. So the Greeks changed the target. Instead of attacking the wall, they decided to attack the decision of the people behind it. This is the story told in Homer's Odyssey, and later in full by the Roman poet Virgil in the Aeneid, written centuries after the war was said to have happened. Historians still debate how much of it is literal fact and how much is legend. But the tactic it describes, winning through deception instead of force, was very real in the ancient world. The military strategist Sun Tzu wrote about it directly in The Art of War, arguing that the greatest victories come not from breaking an enemy's defenses, but from making the enemy defeat themselves. According to the story, the Greeks built a massive wooden horse, hid soldiers inside it, and left it outside the gates of Troy. Then they sailed away, seemingly giving up the war. To the Trojans, the horse looked like an offering, a gift left behind for the goddess Athena. What made the horse effective wasn't its size or its craftsmanship. It was what it triggered in the people looking at it. Curiosity about an unfamiliar and enormous object suddenly at their doorstep. Pride, because dragging it inside felt like claiming a hard-won victory. And a kind of religious caution, a fear that rejecting or destroying what looked like a sacred offering might anger the gods. Some voices in the city, like the priest Laocoon, argued against bringing it inside. They were overruled. So the Trojans did what the Greeks were counting on. They opened their own gates and pulled the horse in themselves. That detail matters more than anything else in the story. The Greeks didn't breach Troy's walls. They never had to. The wall stayed intact the entire time. What actually failed was the judgment of the people who controlled access through it. This is the part of the story that tends to get lost under the drama of the wooden horse itself. The horse was never the weapon. It was a prompt, designed to produce a single outcome, a voluntary decision to let it inside. Once that decision was made, the strongest defenses in the ancient world had already been defeated, without a single wall ever coming down. 3,000 years later, the walls look different. Instead of stone, organizations now rely on firewalls, encryption, and layers of network security built to keep intruders out. But the same basic vulnerability is still there. It just moved. Today, it lives in the inbox. This is what phishing is. A fraudulent message, usually an email, sometimes a text or a phone call, designed to look like it comes from someone trustworthy. A bank, a coworker, a company's own IT department. The goal isn't to break through technical defenses. It's to get one person to voluntarily click a link, hand over a password, or approve a payment. According to Verizon's Data Breach Investigations report, attackers consistently favor this approach over brute force technical attacks, because tricking a person is often cheaper and more reliable than defeating well-built security systems. Why spend resources trying to break an encrypted system when you can simply ask someone, convincingly enough, to open the door for you? The psychological tools haven't changed much from the ones used at the gates of Troy. Urgency. An alert claiming an account will be suspended within the hour. Authority. A message that appears to come from a CEO or a manager, asking for something to be handled quickly and quietly. Curiosity. An attachment with a tempting or alarming label. And social proof. A message that looks like it's continuing a familiar conversation from a sender the recipient already trusts. More advanced versions of this exist too. Spear phishing customizes the message to a specific person, using details that make it feel personal and legitimate. Business email compromise scams go a step further, impersonating executives or vendors to convince employees to authorize real financial transactions. The FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center has repeatedly identified business email compromise as one of the most financially damaging categories of cybercrime, often resulting in losses far larger than more technically sophisticated attacks. None of this requires breaking encryption or cracking a password through brute force. It only requires one person, in one moment, to believe the message is real. And just like the wooden horse, the email itself isn't really the danger. It's the trigger. The actual damage doesn't come from the message sitting in an inbox. It comes after someone clicks, logs in, or replies, the moment permission is voluntarily granted. Once that happens, the strongest firewall in the world can't undo the decision that already let the attacker inside. Strip away the wood and the Wi-Fi, and both of these events follow the exact same basic pattern. First, disguise. Something dangerous is made to look harmless, or even desirable. A gift. An email that looks routine. Second, bypass. Instead of confronting the strongest defense head-on, the attacker routes around it entirely. The wall stays standing. The firewall stays intact. Neither one is ever actually defeated. Third, trigger. The plan depends on a single human decision. Open the gate. Click the link. Fourth, payload. The real damage only happens after that decision is made. Everything before it is just setup. In both cases, the attack technically succeeds the moment permission is granted. What happens afterward, soldiers pouring out of a wooden horse, stolen credentials being used to drain an account, is simply the consequence of a decision that was already made. Once you see that shared structure, the similarities go deeper than coincidence. Both attacks exploit trust that already exists, rather than trying to break it. The Trojans trusted religious offerings. Modern employees trust familiar company branding and recognizable senders. Neither attacker had to build trust from scratch. They borrowed it. Both also follow a kind of economic logic. Attacking a well-defended wall or a well-defended network is expensive and unreliable. Attacking a person's judgment is cheaper and, historically, has worked more often. This is precisely why Sun Tzu argued deception was superior to direct confrontation, and why modern data consistently shows attackers preferring social engineering over purely technical break-ins. Both disguises are also carefully calibrated to what the target expects to see. The horse looked like a religious offering because Troy was a deeply religious society that wouldn't risk insulting its gods. Phishing emails mimic exact corporate formatting and familiar tone, because that's what an employee expects a legitimate internal message to look like. And in both cases, the deception succeeds by isolating the decision. In the story, it's a handful of voices in Troy, overruling skeptics like Laocoon, who make the final call to bring the horse inside. In a modern office, it's usually one employee, alone at their desk, making a fast decision without checking with anyone else first. But the differences matter just as much, and they explain why this old trick is arguably more dangerous today than it ever was in the ancient world. Scale is the biggest difference. The wooden horse was a single, custom-built deception aimed at one city. It could never be reused. Phishing has no such limit. The same message, or a slightly personalized version of it, can be sent to millions of people at almost no additional cost. Exposure has changed too. Troy's Gate, once opened, was a single, visible, physical event that people could react to in real time. A phished password today can spread quietly through networks, cloud systems, and connected accounts, often long before anyone realizes anything happened. The window for catching the mistake has also shrunk. Some Trojans, at least according to the story, suspected the horse before it was ever pulled inside. Today, the entire attack can be completed in the few seconds it takes to type a password into a fake login page. there's often no pause left for second thoughts. And the attacker's exposure is different too. Greek soldiers had to physically hide inside the horse, and were vulnerable the moment they climbed out. Modern attackers are frequently anonymous and operating from anywhere in the world, which is part of why the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center has noted persistent challenges in identifying and prosecuting those responsible. Which raises the real question underneath all of this. If the trick is this old and this well documented, why does it still work? The answer is a hidden pattern that runs underneath both stories. Defensive technology keeps advancing. Walls became castles. Castles became encrypted networks. But human psychology hasn't upgraded at the same pace. Curiosity, trust in authority, urgency, the instinct to reciprocate a gift, these are the same mental shortcuts people relied on in ancient Troy and still rely on today. Every gatekeeper, whether standing at a city gate 3,000 years ago or sitting in front of an inbox this morning, is running on the same basic wiring. And that's exactly what both the wooden horse and the phishing email were built to target, because it's the one part of the system that never gets an update. Which points to something worth sitting with. In both stories, the strongest wall in the world never actually failed. What failed was a decision made by the person standing closest to it. That's not a flaw specific to Bronze Age warfare or modern cybersecurity. It's a structural feature of any system that has to remain open enough to function. The perimeter was never really the wall. It was always the judgment of whoever was allowed to make exceptions to it. So the next time you see a headline about a massive data breach, don't picture a hacker cracking some impenetrable code in a dark room. Picture a wooden horse. Because that's really what's happening. Someone, somewhere, is being offered a gift they don't want to look too closely at. Which makes me curious. Think back to that moment I asked you about earlier, the one where you almost clicked. What was it that actually stopped you? Was it something you noticed, something you were taught, or just a gut feeling? Drop it in the comments. I think the answer says a lot about whether the next Trojan horse gets caught at the gate or gets pulled inside.